Okay, so this session is about the role of big data and digital platforms in farming. We've got four speakers, Tom Kirkham, who's the DAFNI Science Lead for STFC, Ifeyinwa, SFN+ Champion and CEO of IntelliDigest. We've got an online speaker, Dr Chiedza Muchopa, who's a senior lecturer in the University of Limpopo, South Africa, and Dr. Jensen, another SFN champion, data scientist for ValSpace, SFN in person. ValSpace? No.
It's a typo from somewhere. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, Tom, can you describe your project, please? You have a few slides.
Yeah. So, hi everybody. My name's Tom Kirkham. When I was on the Food Network previously, I was at the Honorary Scientist, so I did a lot of big data projects. I'm now on the DAFNI project, which is a project more or less on digital twinning and sharing models, and Jens might go in a little bit into that in this talk. But I thought I'd do a couple of slides just to give a bit of background on the big data from a kind of a Hartree perspective. So if it's okay, Peter, yeah. Next slide. So the Food Network started in 2018? 2017. So back in 2017, AI wasn't as much a thing as what it is now, but big data was a big thing. And big data, one way of classifying it is through using the three V's. So velocity, volume, value, variety, and veracity. And lots of different challenges Food Network projects present, but with respect to data, there's lots of different elements where we could probably associate different ones of these V's. So with respect to speed, lots of sensor-based systems we've deployed within our projects, which can, as explained in the previous talks, can collect lots of data over a longer period of time, and that needs to be sorted out. But it could also be analysed as it's being sort of streamed through. So a good example is, and one that came into my head when I was looking at this, is sort of detecting temperatures in chickens and managing that across large flocks in real time. Volume is the sort of classical definition of big data, so huge amounts of data. Lots of use cases for that. For example, remote sensing of different landscapes for detecting different features. The value of the data that data provides, obviously you've got to sort through data and identify what's useful and what's not. That's always a challenge. Variety, that can quite often be in terms of whether it's voice data, image data, textual data, and then veracity again, sort of linked to that, but you can sort of have a lot of legacy systems, particularly within Food Network environments where you've got huge amounts of expensive equipment on farms or in factories that all of a sudden need to be plugged into, say, a big data system. Next slide, please. So with respect to digital platforms, we've obviously dealt with a lot of digital platforms across the lifetime of the Food Network. So, but you know, the cloud has been a main feature. So cloud-based data analytics, data storage, collaboration tools, visualization tools as well. So there's a whole sort of plethora of Tableau and things like that where people have deployed data within Food Network projects to show ideas. And agent-based networks is another example of sort of more sort of abstract deployments within fields of different IoT sensors and then linking those into individual autonomous agents. But obviously there's challenges with that, as touched upon. There's legacy systems, but also there's accessibility. You know, agriculture is quite often a remote environment, so things like power supply, but also trying to upskill end users such as farmers who might not particularly be interested in the technical side, but want to get the end results. Then the last slide is basically the enablers. So it's been really interesting over the evolution of the Food Network, not only with respect to sort of see the emergence of AI as a thing, but also the emergence of different sensor technologies and different other pieces of hardware. So drones, they were there at the beginning, but they've obviously advanced hugely over the time. Blockchain was a big thing at the beginning. It's still around now. But that's been another interesting area. People have done a lot of exploration around what is trust within networks and data. Future telecoms is an area of interest to me, and low power wide area networks such as LoRaWAN, used on a previous project presented earlier. But also we're moving from 5G to 6G as well, and trusted infrastructure such as obviously I mentioned blockchain, but also DAFNI project I work on now is a place where people can share models and they can share data in a trusted way to try and solve problems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Effie.
Hello. So in terms of the work we did through the STFC funded project, it's built on looking at how food waste produced in different locations can be collected and then be able to use that locally. So I think that I did contact Dan before around the work they're doing within local spaces, because the key thing was that if we're able to identify locations where this food waste are produced, and we will be able to collect those food waste and connect them to local producers who are producing food locally. But also, because IntelliDigest has developed a technology, bio-upcycling robots, that can be used anywhere that food waste is produced to enhance the recovery of bionutrients from food waste. It meant that we also looking at how this machine can be put in different locations, whether it could be in hotels, schools, restaurants, by using enzymatic biocatalysis, which is kind of biomimicry, to break down the food waste. We can recover bionutrients. So you're not picking food waste from this location, you're picking a resource. Something that can then be applied in local food production. So there was a lot of work that we needed to do regards the process. So the funding we had was also working with the team within the laser unit in STFC, which also did connect us to some, because I'm based in Edinburgh, to the university, Strathclyde University, that also work with STFC. So they did a lot of work with us, looking at analyzing, capturing a lot of data using photonic sensors to understand the composition of the material that comes into this machine. Then we have a better understanding about the composition of material in terms of carbohydrate, protein, and lipid. That then helps to improve the way we dose enzymes on the food waste to break it down and optimize the process. So that's also part of the work we did through the STFC funded project, and being able to link up with the experts within the Strathclyde University was very helpful for us to be able to progress that design and be able to build a model. So it means that we have to capture a lot of data so around different food materials, what they contain, to be able to build this AI model that when you then use the same photonic sensors and expose the food item to those photonic sensors, the spectra you capture from there, you can then compare it with the database you have, and you will know those composition of the material. So that was quite useful for us. But then I think the other bigger work is when you then have the machine working in this location, how do you collect that data and be able to match the source of the food waste to the different hotels and restaurants and schools and hospitals who are using the machine, be able to pick up that food waste from there and then make it available to local producers who can use that to produce food locally. And also what some of the work we also did was looking at use of satellite data to understand soil nutrient composition, so that we can help local farmers to make decisions on what they're growing, as well as also working with users to understand the demand they have and be able to match that to make sure that we reduce a lot of the food waste, which I'm sure I'm going to talk about in the next session, but I think I'll stop here. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. Right, so we then move to the online speaker.
It's a pleasure to join you all. So I'm going to speak about the work that we did. This had to do with the expert working group on digital platforms. And already as the previous panel was speaking, they were talking about the simple things that we wanted to understand. So our job, really, we were given a task to do a study or to try and understand the digital ecosystem of the agricultural sector. So of course, we had big ideas, but we had little time. We decided that we would just engage in a scoping study of the digital platforms to understand, what is it, and they're specifically looking at the challenges of perhaps in the end how those digital platforms could be accessible to the stakeholders, and particularly the smallholder farmers and the businesses. And the idea of course, is that the smallholder farmers need to be connected to the market, and that would go with this challenge of reducing food waste, and also how do you leverage, the digital platforms that are available. So our task was then to just try and understand. So we did a survey, but this survey was based on secondary data. We wanted to understand the platforms that are available. So we looked at these online platforms, and mainly we decided to focus on those that have to do with market connectivity in the agricultural value chain. And at the end of the project, we wanted to develop an instrument to try and analyze those platforms in terms of what they deliver and for whom they deliver for. So we ended up producing a document. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Jens.
Yes, thank you, Peter. So actually, I would have mentioned the expert working group as well. I started working with the STFC Food Network in the second year of the project, I think. Sonal is nodding, so that must be true. And I came away with something like 5 projects to support, and I have lost track of how many projects I have worked with over the years. So that work has also enabled me to take a step back and saying, are there any patterns and things that are shared between those? My background is, so for much of my career at STFC, I was responsible for the Large Hadron Collider data in the UK. And as Tom sort of mentioned, that's kind of a volume thing rather than a variety. It's very, there's basically just one kind of data, and it's very organized and everything. Whereas with the food networks, we get data from different sources that need to be combined, and we need to do strange things to data sets because it's coming from China. And each of the things in the spreadsheet is in a slightly different format, and there are merged cells and stuff, and you need to work on it to make it usable. And those are the practicalities that everybody faces with when they come into the project. How do we make the data actually work for us? So with the expert working group, we looked at what platforms are already available to farmers to enable them to share knowledge, to manage supply chains, to get climate and weather information that lets them time their watering and sowing and harvesting and what they need to do. Animal welfare, can you monitor cows in the field or detect sheep that get stuck? So there are loads of things we can do with farming. And my interest really is to, I know nothing about farming. I know no more about food than I can cook. So my interest is getting the technologies in there and finding the patterns where we can share data between the different projects and share knowledge. And often it's a low technology level, but then which is all the more reason for sharing it between projects, because then we can put the effort together to build better products.
Okay, thanks. Right, so I'd like to ask each of you top tips for the future. I'll start with Jens and then come around the other way.
Top tips.
Top tips.
Top tips.
So taking this forward, what top tips for other researchers that you can offer?
So as we heard from the first panel, there is it is very multidisciplinary. We have people from all kinds of backgrounds, and my own background is in sort of data and big data kind of stuff. And so as we heard from the first panel, there's a level where we need to first agree what we're talking about and then manage expectations. And often people come to me and say, we need AI in the project, and what they need is data science, or they need a bit of statistics somewhere in the project. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of managing expectations as one of my tips. And also, I think within the food network, we have a really nice community. We have we share with each other, we talk to each other. We have these events where we come together and we network over coffee and talk about projects and things. And I think that has really enabled lots of collaborations and ideas to come out. And we say, oh yes, we must get together one day and write a proposal for doing something and stuff. So yeah, I think there's really, when you go to the Food Network site, you can actually see lots of things, ideas and stuff there that you can pick up and see, oh, is there anything in there that I can use?
No. I just realised I should have asked about what went well and what what was not so successful before I asked about top tips. So what went well and what do you think? Yeah, Jensen.
Okay, what went well? From my personal perspective, I have very much enjoyed working with the STFC Food Network with the projects because it's so like very diverse. There are lots of people with different backgrounds and doing strange and interesting things. And with my DAFNI hat on, it's been great to support them as well because like if you came and simulated restaurants on DAFNI with them, student programmer who was working for her and looked up sort of distances of how do we get things moved around in a circular economy on the network. So I've enjoyed it a lot, and I think that went well. What didn't go so well maybe was overcommitting my time again on a personal level and the uphill struggle I have to register small projects in my system, and even now there are 3 projects I still need to I still owe them some stuff on 3 of the projects. So
okay, thanks. Tom, what went well and what could have gone better?
I think the multidisciplinary approach went really well. Although I work in computer science, I'm not much of a scientist, and it was a real eye-opener working with space science on one project, looking at mass spectrometry in chocolate and how that could improve the way chocolate's produced and was in a factory which was not that high tech, but you could see how the 2 worlds could combine and make real differences. It just needed a big shove. So that was very interesting, and you can see a potential business case being written there, and then it's scaling up. So that's very good. The sort of challenges working at the Hartree Centre, and it's when I was at the Hartree Centre, it's partially due to the way that we presented things, is that, and Jensen's touched upon it, people seem to think that AI and data analytics would solve everything, but quite often the challenge is always the data engineering piece, getting people's data out of the system or into the system or getting it into the right format. That normally takes about 80 to 90% of the effort, which is not very exciting for people, but it is very practical and it makes a huge difference, but especially the people come along that journey with you as well.
Okay, thanks. Ify,
Yeah.
what went well?
Yeah, I think for me, we are in the heart of having worked in academia, doing my PhD, and then transitioning to working in the industry as an entrepreneur was quite interesting. And it means that you focused on something. Mostly if you're doing academic research, you've got a focus on what you're working on, and you're trying to add value to the society through your work. But what really comes to life for me through the network is that you listen to different issues, different challenges from different environment. It just kind of opens up your mind, if you've got the open mind, to see opportunities everywhere. And also, you know, you've got the technology solutions that could really enable that. So for me, I was really in awe when I joined the network in terms of the potential possibilities that lie within the network, and just seeing challenges you've not even thought of. Even though you're working in the food sector, you begin to hear a lot of other projects people are working on. You begin to see how things connect together. I think that was amazing. I think also in terms of, you know, wearing my heart for IntelliDigest at this point is that we've been able to then develop this robotic machine that can be put anywhere that food waste is produced, and we can upcycle food waste, and we can have a huge amount of data insight on what is going on within the system. And one key things we're doing now is to work with DEFRA to see how this could actually help a lot with data collection. And the good thing is that businesses are easier to use that because they're not reporting food waste, they're reporting resource, because ultimately that product is turned into bionutrients. So it's a resource. So now they're going to be reporting resources they're producing rather than they're producing food waste. So it's completely a game changer. And also through that, we also came up with this food tracker platform that we're now developing into various solutions for different stakeholders across the food system. So I think there's a lot of win there. I think in terms of challenges, I think it's just knowing, not really appreciating the long way you have to go from where you are to really having this problem which you have got in mind solved. It's important to appreciate that it may not happen in 3 months, or it's going to take a bit of time to do that, and it may require a lot more funding than you expected. So you have to keep pushing, and because you got yourself into this, for someone like me, that when I start something, I like to finish it. I will have to keep pushing on to see how where is the next resource to make this work. So it means that you're really putting yourself up for a very long run in terms of delivering that solution and solving the problem. So you just have that in mind when you're getting into it. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, thank you. Chiedza, what went well? What could have gone better?
Oh, thank you so much. So what went well for us is we were able to, develop this instrument that we could use to collect the data that we needed. We were able to identify the stakeholders, associated with these digital platforms. Also, we wanted to know the products and the services, and as well as identify the methods and the technologies. To a less extent, we were able to identify the data sources and in our data analysis process, because we mainly dealt with engaging the digital platforms website or their mobile apps, and maybe at times their company reports. So what could go better is if which is part of, or was part of the plan, could still be part of the plan, is to actually speak to the stakeholders, the actual users and the owners of the digital platforms, because in the end, we need to develop an instrument or a framework, of actually analyzing these digital platforms instead of in terms of their usefulness, because who could say it's useful to who? We had, I think, was it Patrick and Dan, when they were talking about when they went to the stakeholders, they're trying to talk about a certain technology, but then they are asking for something else. So when we are evaluating this, we need to know. So basically, we need to talk to the digital platform owners as well as the users themselves in order for us to get to know more. And then we still need to evaluate the data sources themselves in terms of what is useful for who in what context. So in terms of also the connectivity or the platforms, we were indeed able to identify the e-commerce platforms for agricultural products, and that there are also trading platforms, there are supply chain management platforms, and there are also farmer-to-farmer networking platforms. And we also have realized that other services, on these platforms are also coming into play. They put there as an additional. So although we were, focusing ourselves on the market connectivity, there's more that we could look at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to continue by asking you, Chiedza, so what top tips have you got for researchers going forwards, which I think you could rephrase another way as saying, if you could go back in time to the start of the project, what would you tell yourself to do differently?
Well, ideally, we would need more time. You need more time in terms of, achieving this. I think the team was ambitious enough to know what needs to be done, but within the time that we had, this is all we could do. But I will go back to the same point that I made, that in order for us to really have a comprehensive take on the usefulness of these digital platforms for the actual stakeholders, we need to have the platform owners and the users talk to each other. We need the co-development of those platforms. because the developer might be developing a good thing, but the smallholder farmer, maybe that's not, you know, what works for them. And also, secondly, the context matters. The context of a smallholder producer in a developing country is different to that context in a developed nation. Hence, you might find that we have this good technology, but if we take it, for example, to a smallholder producer in South Africa, maybe the answer is this is not the same. Maybe how best we think this technology is not how this farmer sees it in their own context. So let's have the farmers, let's co-develop. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Tom. So, what advice would you give people going forwards? What advice do you wish you could go back in time and give yourself at the start of the project?
So, advice for myself would be to thoroughly explore potential follow-on funding opportunities. Something we always try and do, and there is different pockets of work where you can get extra funding to work with STFC, such as analysis for innovators through Innovate UK. But the joining up of that with the Food Network, it's not through any fault of the Food Network. It's more, you know, STFC probably could do with more coordination to link those things up better. For people starting out on projects, I think the Food Network has sort of reinforced the notion of that if you get somebody from a domain such as food, which is quite a specific area, and they come to, say, a space scientist with an idea, sometimes there's a lot of value in just a conversation. It doesn't have to be a funded project, and sometimes some of the really small projects have yielded great results because they've enabled people to invest in the right things or prove an innovation that's worth really going for, and really got people motivated to do it. On the other hand, you know, it's saved a lot of people's time and effort by saying, you know, this might not work or it's been done before. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, thanks. Iffy, same question.
Yeah, I think for me would be to have an open mind to what you may come across or the challenges that may come across in the process, and also don't underestimate the challenge you're going to face in the process, and just be open to understanding what people are offering, especially the experts within the STFC Food Network. If you're going to do STFC, sorry, if you're going to do some work with them, because what you may come with may not be what they may be proposing just because of their background and expertise and the level of work they've done. So having an open mind to trial it and then prove, okay, probably it's better or it's not better is very important. And I think collaboration is key, being open to collaborate with people, to work with people, and explore opportunities where you never even thought of or imagine could be applied is very important.
Okay, thanks. So Jens, finally, what advice would you have given yourself?
Just briefly, the way you would work with RAL space or scientific computing is different from how you would work with ISIS, because you need to pay for it out of your project, and that hasn't worked well. If I would have gone back in time saying, find a better way of doing that, working with Melina and myself. So last year I had a bit of funding to work with projects, and while that hasn't worked perfectly in terms of getting the invoicing stuff and things, but it worked a lot better than trying to set up little tiny projects with a system designed for 100,000 to £1 million project.
Okay, thanks. Any last words of wisdom before I open the floor to questions? No? Okay, so questions from the audience, please. Melina. Oh,
for the online audience. Thank you. Thank you all for your insights. I have rather a comment and a question following. So we are talking about big data and digital platforms, but what I realize coming from a calibration background is that all these data have uncertainties, they have errors that can mess up the models, can cause deviation from the expected outcome. I was wondering, based on your experience, whether you've seen all these data sets that you're collecting, coupled with the uncertainties or the errors? Is there a change in culture? Because a few years back, we were focusing on data. We didn't know anything about the errors associated with the data or uncertainties. And I just wanted to hear your personal experience, since you're handling all these different data sets, variety of data sets and big data sets, and if uncertainties are stored in the digital platforms that you've worked with.
Jens?
People are looking at me, yes. Yes, uncertainties are important, and we were discussing over coffee this morning where even journalists don't understand statistics and can misreport results that they have just read the headline and they say, oh this and this causes that. In DAFNI, we're trying to build. We have a program now called Building a Secure and Resilient World, which will have a lot of uncertainties in it, and we have researchers who are building stuff for us to help with uncertainty quantifications and sensitivity analysis. And ideally, we would have those packaged up for you to, when you bring your data into the platform, those tools can, and you do, say, Monte Carlo simulations or something, these tools can help you quantify uncertainties in the scenarios that you would explore in climate change, how climate change affects farming. There's a lot of uncertainty about, we don't know how much temperature is going to rise, and precisely what the impacts are. You need to model those uncertainties in your thing. And when we were talking to Vahid yesterday, he also had sensitivity analysis in. I need to look at the details, but yes, he had the sensitivity analysis in there. So yes, it is something to try to understand, and there is a tendency for people just to say, oh, these are the numbers, like the economy has gone up by 0.001%, right? So it's gone up. But some of those things could just be random variations, and as data scientists, we need to work with people to try and understand that and make sure they don't misinterpret the results. A little bit like the official statistics bodies will work with governments to try and make sure they don't misreport the crime statistics to make it sound good with it.
Thank you.
Well, just a quick one that what we do in regards to address uncertainty and also sensitivity of data we collect is to just train the models to always continue to learn, which I'm sure is something that you are of. So depending on what material is coming to the system, that it could always learn from it and improve the model. So that's just what we do. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, thank you so much. I have a question for Jens and Tom. I'm a little bit familiar with DAFNI, and my question is about collecting the data. Do you have any plan to collect the data, or plans, for example, focusing on sustainability of agri-food, resilience of agri-food here in the UK or other countries? For example, have you designed I don't know, something like a puzzle to collect the data one by one in different modules to complete the picture, or you focus on small projects to bottom up plan to complete the data? Thank you.
I can have a first go at this if you like.
Yeah, please.
So I'm relatively new to the DAFNI project, but in its essence, DAFNI is an open platform for researchers to share their data on and share their models on. I think we've grown kind of organically through different funding and different projects, so we have definitely gone from the bottom up, project specific. But there's definitely scope to cut across projects to bring things together. You can go onto the DAFNI website and register for an account and have a look what data and models are already there. But we're always open to looking at potential collaborations where we could get some maybe funding to support the work and and bring things together that way. I think Jens, you'll probably know more specifics about what potentially could be on the platform.
I would mention the sort of technicalities of you uploading data sets into the DAFNI platform and adding metadata and making it fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And you can decide how open you want it. We're also looking at how to import data in a kind of digital twin scenario where you have something out in the field, and or it could be IntelliDigest where it's reporting back to us, and then you use that to simulate digital twin environments. I would also say in the coffee break, have a chat with Tegan, who sits over there, who is our data curation specialist. She used to work with HS2 and knows a lot with the archaeologists, and knows a lot about data management and sort of importing data and making it reusable. And she's working with DAFNI on making DAFNI even better for this purpose.
Okay, any other questions from the room?
I was going to ask a question that I think you sort of alluded to. Over the years, through the STFC, there is clear evidence that the work that the STFC does and DAFNI does generates very good value in terms of how you collaborate with, smaller businesses, individuals, researchers, and even farmers. However, it still comes across to perhaps certain people outside of this room as very technical. And so there is some sort of mental block. Like if I was a smallhold farmer looking for a solution to a problem, DAFNI would probably be one of the least places I'd be looking to, even though there is help there. And so as part of the SFN's legacy, one of the things I'd want to understand if you had any plans on how to make it more, for lack of a better word, relatable, so that the spectrum of people that can access your services and find use and benefit and increase that value scope is greater. And then secondly, just putting you all on the spot, in terms of food waste, it can happen at 3 main stages, I would say summary. So cultivation, and that could be pre-cultivation all down to germination. It could happen at harvest stage, so post-harvest, and consumption, and obviously we have at the consumption level where people eat and etc. Where do you think the biggest challenge still lies? So where is it that we require the biggest intervention to make a big difference in terms of really tackling the problem of food waste?
Okay, at risk of talking again, if I can just answer the first question, in DAFNI, we are removed from the farmers. Farmers will not be accessing DAFNI directly. We will make products that farmers will use. So we are one step removed from that, but of course, it's important for us to test things, whether it's an app or something, with the actual user community. So in that sense, you should come to DAFNI as a researcher working with farmers, not as the farmer themselves. But ultimately, the products have to be useful. They have to be used by farmers to be really useful. And I will let Ify talk about waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to touch on DAFNI again, because IntelliDigest, we've worked with DAFNI in the past. I think I'll kind of put it in the way that USDA operates. So they've got this big data set which people can benefit from. So then you use, if you're a business or a researcher, you can use that data set to then develop something that the community can use, whether they are farmers or businesses. But I don't see DAFNI. DAFNI can do a lot of work in terms of creating the infrastructure and the structure to do a lot of analysis and work. But it is not something that a lot of the community, members of the community can engage with directly. But that is a resource that businesses, researchers can tap into and create an interface that the community can work with. So in terms of the food waste, food waste is a global problem. I think it's important to understand that there are edible food waste and food loss, and there are inedible food waste and food loss. So what we need to do is tackle the edible food waste and food loss. It's very important that we reduce that amount. And it means that every stakeholder within the food sector will need to play a role. So both us here, we've got a role to play there, as well as also the business. And I keep saying it that we, the households, the finite users, we've got huge amount of power to make decisions within the food system. We talk a lot about plant-based diets and stuff. I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a vegan, but I'm a flexitarian. So it's important that we understand that we need to have a balance in this approach, and we need to make the right decisions that help, whether in terms of just helping the food system as a whole or addressing food waste. And I think once we start taking a strategic approach to planning across the food system, because at the moment, what we do is more like, we think there's this huge amount of resource in the food sector that we can just dip our hand in and keep taking, but it's just that it's not something that will always be there available. And unless we take a strategic approach to start planning the food system and how we produce food, how we consume food, then we can actually address the challenges we have in the food system. And that also comes down to food waste, because our approach is what is causing the food waste. So if we continue with the monocultural aspect of growing food in large quantities and then, you know, destroying the soil health, the end of the day, we produce a lot of these key crops, 5 of them, which then we use to produce a lot of things that end up getting wasted because, you know, just the way we've got the system in place. Or we need to step back and then say, just like Dan was saying, how do we use locations around us to produce diverse crops that people can eat and then improve their health? So there's a lot we can do there to reduce food loss and food waste. If we start being strategic about it, if we start planning better, we can actually address especially the edible food waste and food loss. And then when it comes to the inedible food waste and food loss, that's where solutions like the IntelliDigest machine can be quite useful to create bionutrient that's used back again in the food system. But ultimately, I think the key problem is around the edible food loss and food waste. And unless we take a strategic approach to planning how we produce food, how we distribute food, how we consume food, then unfortunately we can solve the problem.
Quick point on the DAFNI one. I think the Food Network's demonstrated some interesting things, that if you get some innovation out to farmers and people involved in the sort of food supply chain, they're prepared to experiment with it. And, you know, over the last 6 years, we've seen the emergence of open AI and large language models, and people applying those in loads of different areas. And prior to that, they were, you know, with the increased use of the internet in areas where there was no connectivity, people used mobile phones to connect to the internet, which really pushed things along. I think if we can, and we're all within STFC scientists focusing on our own work, which it makes it hard for us to, well, we don't really have the resources to really push it in terms of user friendliness, but working with people like the Food Network enables us to get our message out into specific domains and try and meet people halfway, to enable them to like push it into their sort of industry areas and their communities of interest. So I think the Food Network's kind of shown the way in that, but there's still a long way for us to go, but more work like this definitely helps.
Okay. I have a follow-up question for Jens. Jens, you said that farmers wouldn't be talking to DAFNI, they would talk to researchers who would talk to DAFNI. And that's clearly a sensible way to organise things. My question is, how do the farmers know how to find those researchers?
It's more the other way around in my experience. The researchers know where to find the farmers.
Okay.
Right. So for the researchers, I think the challenge is if your background is not in computing, then many of the computing resources that are available, particularly from STFC, but also from commercial clouds, are very difficult to use. I will challenge you to set up a Jupyter notebook in the cloud and feed some data into that in a way if you're not a computing expert. So either you have people at your university or you go to something like DAFNI where the barrier is lower for the entry to getting useful stuff done. But it would still be the researcher doing that rather than the farmer. Wow. And researchers would know where to find the farmers and engage with them.
Can I go next? Because mine's actually related to that. So I have a question for both Jens and also Chiedza. So you both mentioned sort of platforms, and we have this issue right now actually that we we provided measurement data to farmers, and that's great, and they're happy with that. And the next step is then how you take that data and go on to things like data-driven irrigation and things like this, right? Where they actually want to combine that within a single platform to their irrigation prescription modeling. And the big issue we have is, we can write code to do that, and we have sort of a simple case where we've implemented the entire platform using sort of open source IoT frameworks and things. But then the issue you kind of have is either a farmer still needs to set up a server to do that, or you need to try and modify your data so it can fit into existing platforms. And that usually means having to strip back your data, remove key details that kind of then limit its application. So you mentioned, both of you, so you looked at sort of, the expert working group looked at different platforms that farmers are using and sort of things like that. Is there any that really stand out as solutions that would have quite a wide spread impact in terms of that sort of thing, of platforms that you can upload new data to and are easily extendable, so that it would be relatively easy to add new forms of data that could feed into models?
Chiedza, maybe respond to this one.
Thank you for that. In terms of, I think your last question is exactly what we were trying to find out, and we can still find out. As I mentioned, in terms of the data sources themselves, we really still need to analyze that. And really, the idea, well, maybe could be an answer for another question or a different topic. And speaking from the smallholder perspective, you find that farmers are ready, and maybe data systems are ready, they're needed, but they're probably not, working together. So there's that need of knowing what question needs to be answered. And so the experience, sometimes when it comes to data itself, is just the smallholder farmers, especially, they might have a feeling that data is just being harvested from them. So we need to know the question, and then be able to trace how that data is used, and then for what purpose, and whether it is being correctly used. Hence, you had me say that we need to have develop a framework, for analyzing what is a successful data platform. Because I could tell you it's successful, or a farmer could tell you, no, this is not successful. And from actually your question, from what you're actually saying, is actually trying to seek a question to that answer of really what is a successful platform, and for who. So that's the comment that I can just offer for now. And obviously, then there's still an expense itself in terms of the data that is being shared. It's not easily shared sometimes, and it's not efficient. I think I'll leave it for now. Maybe Jens, you could continue on that.
I think I can come in there. So part of the work we did, we'll be able to set up a food tracker platform. You can check it, www.worldfoodtracker.com. And for us, it's all about helping farmers and connecting them to communities where they can sell their produce, as well as also taking the food waste, the processed food waste, and then making it available to local farmers. So I think that's something that can be quite useful for the work you're doing, in terms of having an interface that farmers can work with directly. And I think for most platforms, is like most platform, they're using AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, and this platform has got the capacity for you to be able to probably use a lot of data and use those data for your model. Or you can use other platforms like Kanu, where you can dump a lot of data, and it's kind of a notebook where you can dump a lot of data and do some data manipulation there, and then connect them to the cloud platforms and still be able to make informed decisions from there. So happy to have a follow-up chat with you, Patrick, on that.
I'll get to a couple of online questions now, because I think it fits in nicely with the others. There are two questions actually from Nathaniel Wama. Thanks to the organisers of the conference, I'd like to be part of this. How can this organisation extend this technology to local farmers, to other countries, mostly Nigeria, where agriculture is really thriving?
I would say, also in response to Patrick's question, the stuff I have done with the projects tends to be at a much lower technology readiness level. So if you want a platform, you go to these people who will know much more about it. I've tended to do stuff where a farmer would need to run a Raspberry Pi on their farm and connect some Arduinos and stuff into it. But those are also things that you could take out in the world because you can get these products anywhere. And so, yeah, so they're kind of things that we could build on that we have developed, but they have a low technology readiness level.
Just to say that the lady that asked the question, or whoever the person is, can check the Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program, which is part of the work we do, STFC Food Network. I think STFC Food Network, when we had the funding, actually allocated some funds to support the participant of the Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program to be able to work with experts in STFC and gain some digital technology. Now that the funding has ended, hopefully we may have to explore other ways to be able to do that. But the Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program, if you just Google it online, is supporting young graduates to engage with the food system. So we've been running the program for the past 3 years. The PI now is one of the reviewers for the program, and we'll be announcing the top participants for the 2024 cohort on 5th of December as we hold a webinar on financing food systems in recognition of World Sorry Day and International Day of Banks. So that is something we've been doing with through the STFC Food Network, supporting young graduates to engage with STFC experts, as well as also be able to leverage the opportunity to develop digital skills, which then will enable them to do a lot more within their communities. Thank you.
Okay, well, the next question, I think you might understand the next question. But, does SFN have a training platform where people like us who are passionate for agriculture as well as studying in school can be trained comprehensively?
Yeah, I think that answered the question.
Yes,
So just
yeah.
Google globalagrifoodtechpreneur.com. Sorry, Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program. You'll be able to find it online, and we'll be opening for the next cohort. Once we do the webinar and showcase the top 10. After that, you can sign up for the next cohort, which is 2025.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, do you have a question?
I think you're going to ask the question. You go.
Yeah, go.
Okay.
No, just very, very quickly, and this is for everybody. I think this is one of my maybe a dream that if it comes true. So can we actually have a standard operating protocol for data collection for any defined objective? So for example, if the objective is to connect smallholders to the market, and we understand that smallholders in Kenya, Nigeria, India, South Africa, wherever, they might be having similar sort of issues because most of the market are informal market as compared to the developed countries where most of the supply chain is formalized and there are contracts and everything. If we understand that more or less the supply chain is of similar sort of design and more or less the problem is of similar sort of kind of problem, can we actually have a standard operating protocol defined for data collection so that when it comes to data analysis, you don't have problem to deal with data gaps or data cleaning or like, you spend a lot of time in doing that, especially data coming from a different format or different types or different frequency. Can we actually practically have some of that?
I would say there are standards organizations. I don't know about farming specifically, but I do know that governments will often not take a standard unless it's an ISO IEC standard. And getting something into ISO IEC is not entirely trivial. And
very time-consuming process. I know
Yeah.
because I worked on space data standards.
yeah, and I've worked with ISO IEC JCC 1SC38, which is cloud and distributed computing. And yeah, so it takes time to make a standard, and a project prototyping a protocol will need years to get a standard through most standards defining organizations.
Yeah, and also we did a similar thing. I think Tom was involved with radiotherapy. We did radiotherapy governance of standards. I won't go into it now. I wanted to ask someone at the back asked the question about challenge-led approach, and Tom, you mentioned about secondary funding. Let's flash back to 2010 when all this, the thinking started to happen about creating the concept of this network. if you think about Sunil's diagram, you had the capabilities and facilities on one side, and then the challenge themes. Those challenge themes come from the what was UKRI now, Innovate ICUK, Global Food Security Cross Council Programme, and on that programme were DEFRA, FSA, Soil Association, the National Farmers Union, and they are all communicating with the farmers and bring those people together to tell us, and the researchers that we engage with, what the challenge is. So it was a challenge-led approach. So STFC being facilities and science and technology, my group, the group I was in, was coming in at the Z-axis saying we're a challenge-led approach, multidisciplinary, multi-challenging. It was very, very diverse. And so as a result, the UKRI, different houses and research councils saw it as rather alien. So we were coming in, and you know this, that we were coming in and saying there needs to be secondary funding, and we spoke to industry about secondary. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes I think you're right. There needs to be something that makes that happen. But can I throw a few hand grenades in? Can I throw COVID in? Can I throw Brexit in? Can I throw multiple governments that were reducing funding in research areas? It didn't help. So it was a fight. So you had a silo scarcity mentality across the research funding domain that made it difficult to get secondary funding. That's not an excuse, and it's not good enough. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't fight more for all these great projects. I'm so excited at some of the things I've heard today, you know, and I think they are worth all fighting for, but it's difficult. That's it. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Maybe just to respond to Sonal's question, maybe at a high level, this talking about standardization, unless maybe you can get the, say, national statistical offices, you know, to start collaborating on this, because you're talking about different countries, whether we could standardize the data that is collected, that so perhaps if at a high level, maybe the national statistical offices could work together. But this goes back to the same point that we're trying to make, that first of all, you need a framework to be able to evaluate, the digital platforms. Once you know that this is a particular platform, it's supposed to work this way, this is the data that will be needed. Hence, so if we can agree on what is a successful or data platform in the first place, then perhaps maybe we could start to move towards that. Otherwise, the data might just be different just because of the uniqueness of the agricultural commodities themselves. So you find that depending on what commodity you are talking about, perhaps already the data that you're talking about is a different data set that is needed. So there's all that uniqueness, and there's all that, the different types of, farmers for different. So there are things we need to think about first. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, thank you. One last question.
Thank you. So actually, I wanted to ask Professor Kanu a question regarding food growth. So what I find is in India, a lot of agricultural produce is wasted because they sometimes overgrow the thing. So I have talked with farmers in some sectors and asked them that what kind of thing can lead you to get a particular estimate of the quantity of agricultural crop you want to produce. But they don't know what kind of data should be used to make a system which can predict. So I want to ask you the question that, is there a possibility to list down all the data needed to make a system which can predict the requirement of the crop?
Very, very good point. So I think like in the UK, because you have the big supermarkets and they've got Contact, which is a platform that work with the big supermarket to look at what people are buying. Through Contact, which is a very expensive platform to be able to do research on, you can have a fair idea of these are the produce, the apple, banana, these are the things that people are purchasing. So from there you can see, okay, and a lot of the market use that to plan what they're going to purchase and when they're going to purchase it. What we're trying to do with the food tracker platform is differently. So we trying to engage with households to help them think about dairy nutrient requirements. Our focus is about nutrition. How do we help people think about the daily nutrient requirement so that then they plan what they eat around the daily nutrient requirement, because that's going to help them not just about purchasing the food, but really meeting their health requirement. So if we get more people doing that, just it doesn't mean that that's what when we say to people, we say the difference between planning a meal and meal plan. So people are scared of saying, I'm going to, you want to make me plan this, so I stick with it. And we say to people, no, we just want you to think about, okay, in the next 4 months, I may eat this and it may help me meet this nutrient requirement. We can take that information and then work with local farmers and say, these are the things that people are needing to eat within this location. Can we help you to find spaces where you can grow that food and make it available? So with that, you're matching consumer consumption with producer consumption, and that will cut off a lot of the food waste that comes from farmers just thinking, I've got this space of land, I can grow this stuff there. So there's a lot we need to do with people to come to that level where they think, okay, I can actually plan. And one of the key things is that we don't say you can't eat out. We're not saying you must plan your meal around cooking at home. You can even plan your meal about, so if you like working in York, in University of York here, and you have a restaurant where you eat food here, we want you to consider that, because we can go to that restaurant and say, we have 10 or 20 people who are going to eat lunch here every day, and they're going to eat this. Can you use that to plan too, so that they can support local producers? So at the end of the day, you see everyone across the food system working together, because you as a household or as an individual has provided that information of what you need. It helps your restaurant to plan. It helps the suppliers to plan. It helps the farmers to plan. At the end of the day, we can cut off a lot of the edible food waste and food loss that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the speakers and indeed all the questions. Thank you.